You weren't supposed to be home yet. My mom needed care, right? Why are you here? I had secretly returned home after the care for my mother-in-law settled down a bit, without telling my husband. It was supposed to be a surprise. However, the person I found at our home, which was supposed to be just my husband, was my husband and his mistress. My mother-in-law had broken her leg, and I had been taking care of her overnight in place of my husband, who claimed he was too busy with work. But as it turned out, he had been taking the opportunity of my absence to bring a young woman home, and judging from the situation, it seemed they had unexpectedly run into each other. "Are you his wife?" The mistress, as if it were the most natural thing in the world, was standing in the kitchen, doing the dishes. "That's my place. The mug you're washing right now is mine." Running into the mistress, the one truly cornered here should be my husband, yet he maintained an unflustered demeanor and said, "If you were coming back, you should have said so earlier." His remark and the obvious presence of the mistress answered the unease I had been feeling about my husband lately. So that's what it was, and I was disappointed in myself for not realizing it sooner. Standing there dumbfounded, my husband, without a hint of remorse, added insult to injury. "Excuse me." There was absolutely no reason for me to be kicked out, yet I couldn't bring myself to assertively speak up, and I ended up leaving. Of course, I had no intention of doing as my husband wished. I immediately headed to a certain place. I was going to confront him with reality. It was too late. Even if he cried and begged, I will never forgive my husband. "My name is Sally, and I live with my husband, who is 2 years older than me, and we don't have children. Given our age, it's about time we started thinking about it, but considering our relationship, I'm hesitant. I often find myself wondering if this is really okay. I work part-time at the local grocery store during the day and get straight to making dinner when I get home. It was a repetitive routine, but maybe things would have been different if there had been even one warm conversation between me and my husband. But I had long since given up on expecting that. "Is this ready-made food?" "Ah, it was half off. You like fried stuff, don't you, Ken?" "Ah, so you've started to slack off on even your duties as a housewife." He always says things like this whenever I show even a bit of tiredness. He comes at me with just a part-timer's taunts. I think living with such a person is nothing short of hellish, and my husband must feel the same. Yet lately he seems happy fiddling with his cell phone more than ever. I was completely alone until I met my husband in my early 20s. I had already lost both my parents, and I had been living alone in the house I inherited from them. Our meeting came through a mutual acquaintance, and perhaps because my husband had also lost his father to illness at a young age, we found common ground. That was kind of the start of it all, leading to a serious relationship and eventually marriage. "Nice to meet you, Sally. I've heard a lot about you from Ken." That was what his mother said when I went to greet her after we decided to marry. She smiled kindly at me, making me nervous, and I still clearly remember it. It reminded me of my late mother. Unconsciously, throughout our marriage, she has given me sound advice at times and has watched over me from a comfortably distant closeness. My mother-in-law is still a dependable figure for me, and I am very grateful to her. However, the problem was my husband. It's like he's a different person from before we married, and despite both of us working, he doesn't help with the household chores. He absolutely won't tolerate any back talk from me, a typical male chauvinist. While I'm the one who wants to run away, overtime and business trips have increased, and our relationship has only grown more distant. Ken seems busy with work, yes indeed. Don't overdo it, Sally, and let me know if you need anything. Anything? I couldn't possibly tell my mother-in-law the truth, that her son is the cause of my daily misery. No way. On the phone, I managed a polite laugh, but as soon as we hung up, I sighed. My mother-in-law lives alone now, and honestly, I worry about her more than myself. I thought about the 3 of us living together someday, but if that happens, there will be one person I just can't agree with. It was during this time that I got the call. My mother-in-law had missed a step on the station stairs and fractured her leg and arm. Fortunately, there was no major damage to her head or organs, but it will take at least 2 to 3 months for the bones to heal completely, and of course, she'll need someone's help. With my husband's frequent overtime and business trips, that someone has to be me. I'm sorry for all the trouble. It's okay. I've always relied on you after all. I gladly took on caring for her, staying at her place for a while. Commuting from her house to my part-time job was actually more convenient than from my current home. That was a big reason, but mostly I was worried about her. Even so, her condition wasn't dire, needing help with simple tasks like meal preparation, bathing, and dressing. There was also a part of me that felt happy, doing for her what I couldn't do for my own mother. Ken is so lucky to have such a wonderful wife like you. Has Ken been in touch with you about this? This time he seemed worried, but usually he tells me I nagged too much. I think he's really missing out. Back when we first met, he was so understanding of my family situation, but where has that husband gone now? You need to cherish when you can, he had told me, and I wish I could throw those words right back at him. And although he seemed concerned about his mother this time, something felt off to me. When I said I'd stay with her to take care, he seemed oddly pleased. His happiness seemed to stem not from his mother's safety being secured, but from some other ulterior motive that had been nagging at me. Yet despite these thoughts, I hoped this incident might serve as a chance to bridge the distance that had grown between us as a couple. How's Mom doing? She's fine. We're having a good time here. That's good. Thanks, Sally. Not only did he express his gratitude over the phone, but he also made a few visits to his mother's house and always made sure to thank me. His and his mother's deep appreciation made me rethink. Maybe I was overthinking things. Though we initially thought it would take 3 months, my mother-in-law was able to get. She was cast off in about 2 months and returned to her normal life without any disabilities. When I suggested staying a bit longer just to be safe, she shook her head. Ken must be missing you by now. I decided to indulge in her act and planned my return home after 2 months. Whose shoes are those? The pumps lined up at the entrance were unfamiliar. I thought maybe he had guests over at this hour, but something felt off. I had returned home unannounced as a surprise, and quietly I shut the entrance door. A strange scent tickled my nose, something a bit too youthful for me in my mid-30s, and I rarely wear perfume anyway. There was definitely a younger woman in the house. Sounds of lively voices came from the living room, making it feel like I was intruding on someone else's home. I'm home. It was the correct greeting since I had come back to my own house. I quietly spoke as I opened the living room door, and my husband, lounging carelessly on the sofa, widened his eyes at the sight of me. The woman who had been cooking nonchalantly in the kitchen also looked surprised, but quickly turned it into a light laugh. "Hey, are you his wife? Weren't you supposed to not be coming back?" "Hey, Ken, wasn't she supposed to not be coming back for a while?" That's when all my suspicions were confirmed. I thought it was strange. Thank you. It felt like I heard that word for the first time in years, and his increased attentiveness seemed almost like he was hiding something. The new housekeeper. I wanted to make a sarcastic remark about the surprisingly young girl he had hired, but the thought of him leading such a life while I was diligently caring for his mother made me tremble with anger. If you were coming back, you should have said something. It was supposed to be a surprise. I planned to tidy up since the house must be a mess, and I was going to cook him a homemade meal since he probably had been eating only store-bought food in my absence. Looks like that won't be necessary now. Are you the wife? She looked me over dismissively and snorted with a laugh. Although she was cuter than what suits my husband, the idea that she could so casually step into a married man's home and act as if she were the wife was unthinkable. Her absolute confidence in her youth and beauty was palpable. Did you hear your mother-in-law fall down the stairs and hurt herself? It's so sad you had to care for her, but well, that's a housekeeper's job, isn't it? We live in this house. If anyone should leave, it should be the housekeeper, right? Right? Ken would probably dislike being with such an old lady anyway. What is she even saying? It seemed like now that it was out in the open, she didn't care anymore, joining the young woman's mocking laughter. My husband boldly spoke up, and I was left speechless. How long has she been here? How long has this been going on? When I asked with a trembling voice, the answers he gave were far from satisfactory. This girl is young but can cook and is really efficient. She's mindful of her appearance, a real contrast to you. So what now? Are you planning to drive me out? Are you going to marry her? No matter how attractive she may be, she surely won't be able to take care of your mother, since she regards caregiving as a mere chore. She's bound to give up soon. I don't know what he sees in her, but he must only be seeing the good parts. If you understood how tough it is to manage life with both of us working, you'd probably be dismissed quickly too. I was completely turned off by my hopeless husband, who tries to justify his cheating and blames only me. If you understand, then just leave already. Leave a surprise. Don't you have some fault in this too? I'm feeling pathetic for choosing such a man. Certainly, my husband is just enjoying his youth with this young woman. He doesn't even consider that this might just be about the money right now, and can't imagine that he'll be discarded eventually, as oblivious as he seems. Staying here is pointless. I'm sorry, I said as I left the house, and I'm sure the two of them were laughing at me. I decided to go back to my in-laws' house for now. Biting my lip under the chilly sky. Is what you just said really true? Yes, everything is true. The warm welcome from my mother-in-law meant so much to me. At first I didn't go into detail, but sensing something from my demeanor, she comforted me by stroking my back as I slowly shared more. Only unbelievable responses followed, and my mother-in-law's forehead furrowed with worry. It made a difference having somewhere to go. Being kicked out, but having a reliable place to turn to was truly a blessing. I can't believe he's my son. I'm really sorry, Sally. She seemed as furious as she was embarrassed and sad. As a mother, just looking at my husband's behavior earlier, it might seem like I'm weaker, but that's not the case. Upon reflection, it's absurd to think I should be the one driven out. Where's the reason for that? The one behaving terribly is my husband, and besides, that house is the one I inherited from my parents. It's ridiculous to think otherwise. Maybe I should stand my ground more. Saying this, my mother-in-law didn't hesitate to call my husband. Do you even understand what you're doing and saying, Ken? Do you realize how much Sally has done for us? The words leaking from my husband lacked any compassion. Even hearing his mother's tears and words, all that came back were complaints about me, with an attitude that almost seemed to blame me. My mother-in-law, usually a calm person, finally exploded with anger. Since she was usually such a calm person, I was all the more surprised by how attentively she watched over me. After taking a deep breath, she stated calmly yet firmly, "Ken, I am disowning you. My current husband would probably be happy that the burden of caring for his mother has lessened, though it was over the phone. Issuing a disownment declaration is a matter that requires considerable resolve. From now on, he cannot rely on being family as a reason for support. Even if there are changes in the future, we will never return to being a complete parent and child." The vows exchanged verbally became quieter as they went on, and as I struggled with what to say, my mother-in-law, having hung up, gave me a cheerful smile. "You probably wouldn't want to live with someone like that, but until you find a new place, would you stay here as my way of making amends?" Oh my, I didn't know how to thank her enough. Despite everything with my husband, meeting her was an invaluable part of my life that would remain. Having spent time caring for her when she broke her bones and feeling comfortable around her, I gratefully accepted her offer. And there's just one more thing. Now it was my turn to make a request. My mother-in-law, holding both my hands, says, "Tell me anything." "Can I still call you mother-in-law?" She blinked back tears and nodded again and again. and so we decided that we couldn't let my husband get away with it, and while living together at her house, we began planning for a divorce. I've always been one to shy away from confrontations, but I couldn't just let him easily take over the house that was my parents', which he now treats as his own. That was something I couldn't compromise on. With the support and cooperation of my mother-in-law, who had promised to always be on my side, I decided to face forward and keep walking. Then a month later, it happened. The incessant calls were from my husband, annoying during work, so I answered just once, and his yelling voice burst through. He was the one who had told me to leave, yet he asked if something had happened. A lawyer came to me. From what I gathered, a lawyer had visited him to discuss divorce, eviction from the house. He continued to blame me, as if there couldn't possibly be any reason for this. He must have assumed I would meekly leave without a fuss. Thrown into a frenzy by this unexpected turn, he demanded that I do something about it. This was all orchestrated by my mother-in-law. At first, I thought I had to go and talk to him myself, because ultimately, this was a marital issue. However, it was my mother-in-law who stopped me from going alone. "Let's use a lawyer, Sally," she suggested, noting that the family court was nearby. It would be great if he agreed to the divorce smoothly, but if not, it would turn into a real fight. Reclaiming the house might even leave my husband homeless. When I mentioned to my mother-in-law that her actual son might end up that way, she seemed to hope that this might be the wake-up call he needed. After all, trying to sincerely engage with my husband and his mistress, who were unlikely to understand, would end up being a waste of time. Her kindness was also motivated by not wanting to see me hurt any further. She advised that dealing with those two through a lawyer was the best course of action, and we proceeded accordingly. Even hiring a lawyer required evidence of my husband's infidelity. Merely having seen them together wasn't enough for objective proof. First, I hired a private investigator to gather irrefutable evidence of their affair and brought it to the lawyer. With this evidence, you should be able to get a very favorable divorce settlement. Surprisingly, it turned out that my husband's mistress was a college student. I knew she was young, but I didn't realize she was still a student. It was easy to imagine her leeching off my husband's income. Facing the certified mail, he called me, screaming that there was no way he could leave the house. "Then let's have a proper family discussion. Bring your mistress too," I replied. Relieved, my husband agreed. He probably thought that even if it ended in divorce, he could settle things amicably. But the plan my mother-in-law and I were crafting was not so forgiving. I had decided not to hold any sentiment. Even if we had shared a life together as husband and wife, that didn't mean I would forgive and forget. This wouldn't benefit me, and it certainly wouldn't benefit my husband. "Why are you here?" The meeting took place at my in-laws' house. I wondered what kind of expression they would wear coming here, but upon seeing the person already waiting, my husband and his mistress both stiffened. It made sense. The person waiting was not just significant to my husband, but also deeply connected to the mistress. And of course, I was the one who had invited these people here. There would be no one here to side with my husband and his mistress. "Let's not stand around. Please take a seat, both of you." The person who had been waiting spoke, causing my husband to turn pale and break out in a cold sweat. In fact, when I had hired a private investigator, I had not only asked for evidence of the affair, but also for a background check on the mistress. I then explained the situation to the mistress's parents and reported everything. Her parents, being reasonable people, deeply apologized for their daughter's actions. They had come here today, both of them, promising to ensure them leaving the house. This effectively meant there was no escape. "Sally, did you set me up?" "Set you up. I told you from the start, Ken. Let's have a proper family discussion." Nothing I said was wrong, and if he thought I was trying to trick him, anyone would point out whether he was the kind of person who could say that. The reason my husband looked so ashen wasn't just because the mistress's parents had shown up. In fact, the mistress's father turned out to be the president of the company my husband works for. That truly sealed his escape routes. He must be feeling the reality of the situation now more than ever, wondering how he's going to live from tomorrow. To think the two of you were in such a relationship. What's going on, Ken? No, well, that is, it appears that my husband and his mistress had met when her father, the president, had brought her to the company while she was a university student, helping out at her father's company. He might have genuinely admired her as respectable, but when it comes to affairs, one must choose their partners wisely. He would learn today that one cannot just whimsically engage in such actions out of folly or youthful indiscretion. I had trusted and had high expectations for you. It's disappointing. Wait, please, sir, it's not what it seems. This was just a fling. I have a wife, too. A person like you brings down the value of my company. Cutting straight to the heart, the mistress's parents were too angry to even listen to my husband's pitiful excuses. His excuses aren't even excuses. No parent would be okay being told that their daughter was just a fling. It's so embarrassing to listen to. It's counterproductive. Why can't he see that he's only tightening the noose around his own neck? Words are wasted on such people. The mistress's father, who is also the president of the company, acted decisively, telling my husband he was fired and ordering his daughter to move back home and stop living alone. And then it was my turn to act. Could you please sign here, Sally? I was wrong. I messed up. You're all I have. Let's start over. Okay, my husband, in his last-ditch effort, begged for a chance to rebuild our relationship. As I presented him with the divorce papers, he promised to fix everything that was wrong and never to do something so stupid again. So he asked me to reconsider the divorce. To such a conveniently repentant husband, I coldly said, "Please pack your belongings and leave the house within 2 weeks. That house is mine." Despite his repeated pleas, after being sternly reprimanded by both his mother-in-law and the mistress's parents, he eventually agreed to the divorce while crying. Having been fired from his job, now he's lost both a place to live and a home to return to. I've deleted all contact information and made sure never to associate with him again. Although he seems to frequently call my mother-in-law, however, having declared disownement, my mother-in-law completely ignores his calls. And when I visited, she let me listen to the accumulating voicemails. It's like poetry, pathetic. I'm just going to ignore him from now on. The voicemails were filled with almost poetic words. Just from that, you could imagine how my ex-husband was progressively weakening. My mother-in-law mentioned that my ex-husband would live on forever regretting and feeling the magnitude of what he had lost. That's exactly what he deserves. And the mistress has been taken back to her family home, now spending her days commuting between the university and her father's company. Since the company involves physical labor, she works hard on the field. I hope she comes to understand the gravity of her actions through her work. Here you are. Oh my, what beautiful flowers! What's the occasion? Tomorrow is Mother's Day. I had these made with your favorite flowers. After everything settled down, I moved back to the house my parents left me, but continued to have a great relationship with my mother-in-law. I want to think more positively about my life. I'm so grateful to my mother-in-law for always supporting me through the confusion of my husband's infidelity and the house issues, and for caring for me like a real mother. I want to